Hello, and welcome back to Fighting for the Truth. Here at Fighting for the Truth, we buy the truth and we sell it not. We're going to pick up where we left off in the last episode. We're talking about Jeffrey Epstein. Who is Jeffrey Epstein, part two? If you recall, in the last episode, we ended talking about a little bit about the victims who, those that are still alive. And far as my knowledge, every victim is still alive, who was ultimately abused by Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein, and many others. Some have been named as royalty. We know about Prince Andrews or former Prince Andrews, and many well to do, wealthy folks. Some of them make up hierarchies of different countries. Some of them are celebrities, and some of them are just very wealthy. And we're going to dive more into that later on down the road. But I want to focus more on part two of who is Jeffrey Epstein. Now, you heard me talk about that he had graduated from the school of, or at least, excuse me, he took a job at the Dalton School at the age of 21. Okay. Thereafter, or shortly after, he was introduced to Bear Stearns. Now, one thing I spoke about previously, and if I didn't tap into it, I'm going to do it today. Jeffrey Epstein is still known as a great manipulator, a Ponzi scheme artist. He was able to manipulate many people, those of the likes of Leon Black, who was the former CEO of Apollo Global Management, Mr. Leslie Wexner, aka Les Wexner, who spoke about this very well and detailed in his deposition on the GOP House Oversight Committee a few weeks ago, dealing with his whereabouts, his encounters, his partnership, friendship, his knowings, his dealings, business dealings as well with Jeffrey Epstein. He stated on record that Jeffrey Epstein swindled, conned him out of millions of dollars, according to him. Now, whether Lex was being honest or not, Mr. Lex, we know that to be true. At least I know after doing a deep dive of research into Jeffrey Epstein, that he definitely was a great manipulator. So he was able to land a job at Bear Stearns. You heard me speak about this recently, that he was a low level trader on Wall Street floors, where he dealt with numbers, where he dealt with stocks at a low level. Now, he didn't stay at a low level. By the age of 27, this gentleman becomes Epstein, becomes a limited partner with Bear Stearns. Now, keep in mind, he ultimately got the job at Bear Stearns very younger in life, as I just stated to you earlier, looking at his career as a school teacher at 21, carried on to Bear Stearns around 27 years old. Keep in mind that Jeffrey Epstein is still under 30. He has now went from the trading floor working with Bear Stearns to a limited partner with Bear Stearns under the behest of the CEO at that time, Alan Greenberg, aka Ace Greenberg. Okay, he was able to rise the ranks. They had so much influence and so much, um, what's the word I want to use? So much care, so much of honesty, and the word will come to me in a moment. And they had invested so much in him that they believed and they knew that Jeffrey Epstein was able to take a normal stock on the trading floor and hyperinflate that number to the point that he was able to also manipulate numbers on the stock exchange as it dealt with. And I'm not saying he was cunning the stock exchange, but he was able to play with those numbers, and he was able to make suggested trades on Bear Stearns' behalf, obviously selling and buying stocks. But they entrusted him, that's the word I wanted to use, so much. Even after they later found out that he ultimately lied on his resume to Bear Stearns as it pertains to his education and all the different colleges, the prestigious colleges that he had allegedly went to, they found out that he did not necessarily do that. But he was able to get in tight with Bear Stearns, and of course, at that point, rub shoulders later on down the road with Alan Greenberg, who ultimately hired him as limited partner due to his influences and due to his manipulation and due to what many people said. Even Lex said he had a charming attribute about him that could get people and sway people to do things that most could not. So after getting on that trading floor and moving up the ranks, he became a limited partner. At that point, remember, he, as I stated in the last episode, he was a junior associate. Okay. He later started working with Michael Tenenbaum, which ultimately led him to a encounter with Alan Greenberg. And again, I just spoke to you earlier that he became a limited partner later on down the road. Now, in 1976, the firm had discovered that he lied about his application and his resume, dealing with his college degrees. But they thought he was so charming and clever that he was able to trick the minds of very smart financiers that they decided to keep him on and provide him with a second chance after Epstein pled to the powers to be that said that if this opportunity did not come, it would never happen for him again. He was pleading for a second chance, and ultimately they gave him a second chance. And we'll find later on down the road when we get into the criminal enterprise as it pertains to sexual abuse with these young women that Jeffrey Epstein was involved in. He had been given a second chance when he was found to be in criminal violation back in 2008. He was given a second chance by the federal government, which we'll dive into later. Okay, I don't want to give that away yet, but so he's been given many second chances. Okay, but this began his second chance in the finance world. So they gave him a second opportunity. Again, being a great manipulator, Lex Wexner said it himself. After they discovered that he lied about these different things, he again goes on to become a limited partner, grossing over $200,000 annually. Now, remember, he's 27 years old. Okay, that's a lot of money for a 27-year-old, definitely back in the 1980s. Okay, now Epstein was later fired, okay, from Bear Stearns. But believe it or not, it was not due to his manipulation or lying on his resume about education. He was actually let go due to some personal insider trading deals that he had committed. He had violated the SEC regulations, D to be exact, Article 3, excuse me, D, where he made a personal loan to said to be girlfriend of $15,000, okay, with Bear Stearns' money, obviously. And this was found out later on down the road that he had made these violations. Of course, they fired him because of those issues. And but before they fired him, they actually asked him to pay a $2,500 fine. Bear Stearns did that, and they put him on a month suspension. But going further and deeper into it, find out more things about Mr. Epstein, and I think he had ended up committing some more violations within there as it pertains to money swindling. He was fired from Bear Stearns, and that took place, I believe, back in 2008, if memory serves me correct. Now, keep that in mind. He was fired by Bear Stearns, Ace Greenberg, Alan Greenberg to be exact. But we need to address the fact that before all this took place of him being fired, I do want to make sure I dive back into the main events of what Jeffrey Epstein was ultimately doing. Now, keep in mind, he rubbed shoulders with millionaires and billionaires. And one would ask, now, how did this take place? Now, I just wanted you to know about the firing of Jeffrey Epstein, but we need to dive furthermore into how this all took place. It all began again with Bear Stearns. Let's back up and go back into Bear Stearns as Jeffrey Epstein is that limited partner. He begins to rub shoulders with millionaires, billionaires. Of course, he's having meetings and lunch meetings with clients, high end clients of Bear Stearns. He's been praised by Mr. Ace Greenberg to clients that he is just a guy that you need to meet. He can take debt and make it a reality of changing the trajectory and ultimately making you money. That's what he would tell the clients. And this is a gentleman, young man, very charming. He knows his numbers. He knows what he's doing. Have to meet him. I'm going to set you up with him so that you can have your personal meeting with this gentleman. And whatever you're lacking now, he'll be able to help you progress and go forward. And so this is what was said to clients about Jeffrey Epstein. Now, he began advising clients, this was Epstein's life, on tax mitigation strategies. Okay. This led into more of the personal effects and responsibilities and workmanship of Jeffrey Epstein. He was suggested to be a great tax mitigation. We all know dealing with corporations, taxes are one of the biggest things that they deal with. We hear that in politics, how they are not taxed enough and they're getting through all these loopholes. So it's very important for them to find somebody who was challenging and who could manipulate numbers. And so this is where Epstein comes in at. So tax mitigation strategist, whatever that may be, sounds like just a um, fluent name they came up with or title to make it more appealing to clients. Okay, now Jim McCain, um, who was a senior partner at the firm at that time and who later became the CEO after Greenberg, okay, stated that he held Epstein in very high regard. He introduced him to many of Bear Stearns' clients, like I stated to you earlier, and Epstein would appeal to the clients and would reportedly become very charismatic towards them. He offered complex trading strategies, which is what they were looking for. He had clients with large sums of monies, large sums of taxes that needed to be paid, complex taxes dealing with businesses. So this is where Epstein came in handy. He would again have routine lunches with CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, billionaires, millionaires. I told you this. Now, according to Tenenbaum, okay, um, Epstein would be later catapulted to great success under, again, Alan Greenberg. Okay. It is noted that Jeffrey Epstein was coined to be Alan Greenberg's protege. Now, you keep in mind that while at Bear Stearns, this is where the wealth and Epstein fueling his lavish lifestyle begins. It all takes place at Bear Stearns as he is a high level employee, a limited partner. Now, Epstein routinely flew to Palm Beach to visit a woman. Okay. So he had a girlfriend. This is before Ghislaine came on the scene. This woman was, I believe, at that time a model, cosmopolitan, featured on the magazine type female. That time, Epstein was featured in the Cosmopolitan magazine as well as Bachelor of the Month and encouraged this woman so much to the point she started to date him. At one point, they went on a work trip and spent over $10,000, Epstein did, on this woman, on jewelry, clothing for the girlfriend, and all these expenditures was charged under the Bear Stearns account. Now, one would say if this was a public company, he definitely would have already have been brought to justice. But because this was a private company, of course, on the stock exchange, and him being a again high level employee at that time, he had access to company cards, finances, bank accounts. So this is how Jeffrey was able to do this. Now, again, I spoke about the Regulation D, which Epstein had violated at that time when he made that $15,000 loan to this particular person, said to be girlfriend. Some claim a friend or a college friend. However, he did it. He gave it to her free of charge. Okay. And this was a violation under the regulation of D because of C of the SEC, because you needed permission and you needed certain exemptions to be able to claim that tax exemption, and you had to meet certain criteria. And Bear Stearns didn't meet that under Jeffrey Epstein's hand because this was personal and a loan that he had gave without going through the chain, without following the guidelines and the criteria. Of course, they got wind of it, and going back to the firing, this what led them to the, when I say them, Alan Greenberg and his management team, to dive a little bit more into who Jeffrey Epstein was as it pertains to his financial fraud that he had begun to venture into. Now, I spoke about earlier, he was fined 2,500 with a suspension. Now, due to his experience and the contacts that Epstein had made and the contacts that he had brought into Bear Stearns, so we have to give him credit for that. Not only did he take contacts through Bear Stearns that was already generated and formulated, he was able to create new partnerships and contacts within Bear Stearns. So he was regarded at a very high level, again, by Greenberg, Tenenbaum, and others, um, of being a very charming partner in this particular financial firm. So he was able to bring new clients in, which is always great for any type of business, which later led to an establishment of a independent financial advisor on Wall Street. This is where he moved into next. He became an independent financial advisor on Wall Street due to all his client connects and his friendships. Now, in August of 1981, Epstein founded a financial consulting firm called Intercontinental Assets Group Incorporated. And this led into his bounty hunter, per se. That's what he had coined himself to be, a bounty hunter, finding lost or stolen money from very wealthy people. Okay. He bragged to friends that he was this bounty hunter when it came to the financial world. Okay, he was always going to be assisting with recovered funds and people that had money embezzled. He was reportedly going to recover all those funds. Many of these clients had bank accounts, of course, over in the offshore bank accounts, places like the Virgin Islands and different locations of banks where the tax exemptions were less than what it is here in the US. And so he later rubbed shoulders and dated a lady by the name of A. Obregon. Okay, her family was very wealthy. He ultimately became their alleged bounty hunter to reclaim a lot of money that had been stolen from them. Of course, the girlfriend, A. Obregon, had introduced the family to Epstein, told him about his great efforts, told him about how he was a big time financier. He was able to um, help a lot of different wealthy clients out who had lost a lot. And so they believed them. They believed their daughter. They took him on, and he was able to find, honestly, a lot of money that had been taken from them through embezzlement, through whatever means. They ultimately paid him a very hefty amount of money, totaling over $1 million. Now, this same thing happened to a Saudi Arabian businessman who some of you may have heard of. I spoke about it in the last episode, Adon Khashoggi, okay, who dealt with arms and military arms and had some dealings with the Israeli government, but he was able to find a lot of his money that had been swindled or embezzled or stolen, okay, had been stolen from him. So, again, remember now he was doing all of this in his 20s. Then we move into 1987 when Epstein meets a guy by the name of Stephen Hoffenberg, who hired Epstein as a consultant for Towers Financial Corporation. Now, this was a collection agency that bought debts from people who had debts that they had incurred or accrued through banks, hospitals, phone companies, and these were debts they couldn't pay. And so Hoffenberg created this basically recovery company to take over these debts, and I'm sure charged great amount of interest in different things. And you're going to find out a little bit later here in actually a couple moments about the Ponzi schemes of Epstein, because again, I spoke about how he was a manipulator, but also a very well conned and trained person when it came to Ponzi schemes. So him and Hoffenberg became very acquainted to the fact that they became partners. Epstein was paid $25,000 a month for his consulting abilities within this bracket. Him and Hoffenberg later formed a clever plan to um, create a new outlook, as Epstein had coined himself to be the bounty hunter. They later came out with a plan to become the corporate raiders. Okay. They used the Towers Financial Company as their rating MO, method of operation, or modus operandi to make these things a reality. Now, one of Epstein's first assignments was to attempt to have a hostile takeover of Pan American World Airways back in 1987, which of course they do not exist anymore. Now, this was very unpleasant, but it was also unsuccessful. It did not happen. It was very unsuccessful under these skies or the guys that they were trying to use under the corporate raiders. Now, they also tried this again in 1988, a year later. And this time they attempted to take over the Emory Air Freight Corporation, which ultimately dealt with arms and they dealt with weapons, very high profile and high volatile weapons. This was a cargo company that distributed and carried these weapons from one place to the next, one country to the next, and they were unable to do that successfully as well. So both attempts failed. This company basically was dismantled and fell apart. When it got time to be called on the carpet, Hoffenberg placed the blame on Epstein, put him in front of it. And in 1993, Towers found Financial Corporation had a big implodement when it was exposed as, guess what, the biggest Ponzi scheme in American history. Okay. They lost over $400 million in investments. Said it again, they lost over $450 million in investments. Now, today, that would be equivalent to billions of dollars. Okay. And so they lost that. They lost that. They lost it under the skies again, under the guise again of the corporate raiders. Remember, Epstein considered himself to be a bounty hunter as it pertains to financial gain. Hoffenberg ultimately blames Epstein, puts him at the forefront of it. And the deposition basically blames him as the culprit and the standalone person who is responsible for this Ponzi scheme. Now, in 1989, Epstein leaves that company, okay, And as far as we know, he wasn't charged, and we don't even know. There's no record if he was able to take any of that money that was lost before this company fell under. We don't know. Okay. Now, again, as it's been a huge Ponzi scheme, it wasn't on record that anybody was charged, not even Epstein. So he was able to get by with this one. Now, I'll venture out to say that Epstein did take money from this particular Ponzi because, again, he was a manipulator. He knew how to manipulate people, money, and numbers. He knew about how to do it. He knew how to charm. He knew how to brainwash, all these things. And keep it in mind that he was trained by the man himself, Ace Greenberg. So he is very well versed in these particular areas. And so, what we want to do, we want to keep pushing forward with the Epstein investigation and not even going into the Epstein files. I'm here to talk about who exactly is Jeffrey Epstein, what led him to the Ponzi scheme arena, ultimately led him to the criminal enterprise, basically a sex pyramid of trafficking young women around the globe. Okay. Not just here in America, but around the globe under the impression that they were being paid to give massages to Epstein was ultimately led to sexual abuse, which moved into other clients, friends, relationships of men who were also abusing the women, or at the time, the young girls. We'll dive into that, but we have some more ground to cover as it pertains to who Jeffrey Epstein is and what he did to make his money. So, this is part two. Who is Jeffrey Epstein? Next episode, we'll continue to go deeper into following the money. And so, you know now who Jeffrey is. You know now how it all started. And again, if I could set up the first episode, I spoke about his humble beginnings of his life, who his parents were, talked about where he was born, his sibling, talked about his education as a young lad, moving into the college, and after college, moving into Bear Stearns, and talked about his Ponzi scheme efforts, which was successful until he wanted to go a step further and try to have hostile takeovers using the debt assessment to try to gain more wealth from backing up, going from the stock exchange, working in Wall Street on the floors, on the trading floors, I should be exact, to going and working closer with Bear Stearns. Then he is made a limited partner by Mr. Greenberg, moved over after it was found that he violated some regulations under the SEC. He then resigns from that job, not taking any blame or responsibility for the personal loans that he gave friends, girlfriend ultimately. Then moving over to starting his own firm, hooking up with Hoffenberg, and there they start a coalition and they go into the Towers Financial Group together, where they are going to try to take over a major airline at that time, okay, that which was unsuccessful. Then they try to take over a very well-to-do um, armory cargo carrier corporation, flight cargo, by the way, not train or anything like that, or trucks, but air cargo, Emory Airway, which did not work. So both of those particular, which again were Ponzi schemes, failed. Jeffrey Epstein needed to regroup and rebrand himself and find another way to manipulate. So we will discuss that in the next episode. So I'm done for now, and I don't want to give too much because this is in parts because there's so much to unpack. But would you please do me a favor? Would you please do me a favor? Would you please do me a favor? You got to buy the truth. You never can sell it. And why don't we sell it? We give it away. It's free. And why is it free? There's a lot of questions being raised. Why is it free? Because when you know the truth sets you free. And when you have the truth, you want to give it to as many people as you can so that they can be set free, so they can know what's going on, so they can have the reality, so they can know the facts. And ultimately, they pass it on to someone else. That's what we do here at Fighting for the Truth. So keep in mind whenever we do it again, okay, we always want to make sure that we are fighting for the truth. Because when you fight for the truth, doors open up, new ideas happen, and other people can join you. And so I ask God, please, would you continue to bless this great country, bless the men and women that are serving in our United States Armed Forces of all branches. And God, please continue to bless the men and women that are serving in blue. Okay. Until we meet again and until we do this again, God bless you. And we'll see you in the next episode.